So I just thought I'd go over our whole raiding scene in the Shadowlands because it has taken a very weird turn for a few different reasons. But I suppose let's just go over raids, go over all the raids. So I think maybe we can all agree that the Sepulchre, at least so far, is the big standout raid. What are our thoughts?
I'm actually really enjoying it from a healer perspective. It keeps you busy.
Yeah, it's not. It's linear, but it's not boring.
Yeah, boy. Okay. So I've had this sort of idea that I've found out um, and has been a running trend with the Sepulchre lately. It's basically they show you all the mechanics at the very start of the fight, and then once you get past the first phase, it's like, well, that's the rest of the fight. Like I think Anduin was a little bit like that. Halondrus is a bit like that. Artificer. Same with Dosani, arguably. Yeah, for myself, I do think that the Sepulchre is a great raid, mainly because of Artificer has returned to the Sepulchre was a big surprise for me, and how fun he is to face off against with his similar mechanics we've seen in Castle Nathria. Anduin, of course, I really love that fight because it gives people the experience that many people might not know about is the experience of the hellish mechanic from Mythic, Star Augur Atreus, and Unat, Harbinger of the Void, which involves finding your pair and avoiding everyone else. Kinda. It's still the same sort of mechanic. I just think that Blizzard did a good job learning from making a mechanic like Grand Conjunction and making it into an unstable resonance, or in this case, the blasphemy mechanic. And then, of course, the Jailer, but that is a little bit divided because me and Ruby have seen the Jailer. Daki has not. I do have my own bits and pieces to say about the Jailer. So let's just go over a few bosses over the three raids in no particular order. Let's start with Anduin. I think. What are our thoughts on Anduin? I'll go to you first, Daki.
As a so like if you break down Anduin into a fight to raid lead and from a tanking perspective, it is enjoyable. Definitely with the upstairs downstairs phase and splitting your groups. I'm a sucker for splitting raid groups and having one group do a certain task and another group do a certain task. Even if Anduin is really just simply do the same task, I'm still a bit of a sucker for it. So from a layout point of view, Anduin's a decent fight. It's not just a tank and spank, and you got to understand Blizzard could have made that such a single target tank and spank fight by getting rid of phase two, like the downstairs part of that fight. They could have gotten rid of that and done something a lot simpler. But I applaud them for doing a brave thing by doing that, and I think that's what's really that made that fight, honestly. And from a lore point of view, and I guess I'll touch on this a bit later on. There's also some negatives with that fight as well, but from a positive point of view, that fight's it's quite fun to tank. It's very fun to look at. Yeah, 100%.
What about you, Ruby? Healing wise, what's it like?
It's interesting. You really have to pace yourself, especially if you've got a small group, because if you use all your cooldowns before you go downstairs, especially as a resto druid, trying to heal up the Anduin's hopes can actually be quite challenging, especially when you've only got like only hots to go with. So that's definitely a bit of a challenge. And also at the same time, you've got to keep your group up as well, which can also be interesting, especially when everyone's still learning. But yeah, it's definitely a mana management thing, but it's actually really fun.
Yeah, it's just it's just one of those fights where it seems really intense, but if you actually break it down and play each 30 seconds of it, it's actually not that bad. It's just learning it and getting used to the mechanics is the real challenge. I think a lot of the boss fights are like that, where it's only a few mechanics. Some of them can be easy or hard, but once you learn them, you just nail them down and you do it for the rest of the fight.
I think what I like about it is that it does it's short like bursts and it's repetitive. So after you've done it a few times, you sort of work out your timing. It's sort of like, oh well, I should probably use this here, and then it means I can save, say, convoke for downstairs when I have to move, or like something like that. It's like you sort of get a feel for like what you should use and when pretty quickly.
When you look at past raids too, you start to understand that this is a what do you call it, a blueprint for what Blizzard have done good in the past, essentially. So like having overly complicated fights is just, they don't feel good. And when you have like and this is more for end bosses really, but when you've got 4 phases, 3 intermissions, split your group and all this that goes on for 12 minutes, it's great for an end boss. It's not great for a midway boss, if that makes sense. So having Anduin, even though lore-wise very huge as far as being in Sepulchre, it's good to have a fight the way they've built it up, 100%.
I think it's interesting that I believe Anduin originally was meant to be the end boss.
Yeah, that's the thing that was sort of thrown around, is that the Sepulchre, the first ones, feels like two raids squished together, because I think they wanted to maybe have Anduin as the actual end boss and then do another one, another raid later on for the jailer and whatever bosses that may also be there. But at the same time, how will they sort of release that? Would they have to do like a patch 9.3 with a whole new zone, with a whole new content to do? And I think it would just save Blizzard a lot of time if they just...
So to sort of not, I don't know if it's a spoiler or not, but more speculation, I guess, is one of the things that was risen, speculative, again, not confirmed, so it's not canon at all, was to have us go back to Azeroth to deal with the jailer. So jailer was to go back to the soul of Azeroth. So have a look at the jailer's fight. Look at what he's doing at that fight. He's attacking Azeroth's health, essentially. He's wanting to essentially either twist Azeroth or kill Azeroth, one of the two. So if they did want to make Anduin the end boss of this raid, of Sepulchre, and have a small cutscene where Jailer gets away again, which I hopefully I can touch on a little bit later in this podcast, is essentially then following the Jailer back and his lackeys back to Azeroth, and then fighting the Jailer on Azeroth's soul. Lore-wise, again, that would have been a little bit more of a step towards who and what Azeroth really is. I mean, yeah, that could explain why Anduin feels like an end boss per se. Yeah. You got to also understand that they did have plans to add a 9.3 and then they canned it, obviously, for arising reasons.
Yeah, I don't think this game really needs a 9.3. I think 9.2 did do a fairly decent job with wrapping up the Shadowlands, yeah. And yeah, I think I would have much preferred it that way, having to go back to Azeroth facing maybe some more of the Morsworn, and then of course the Jailer, Mal'Ganis, Contessa, and whatnot. But the only reason why I think that may not have been is because, like you touched on, fighting the Jailer in the soul or whatever, or in like the actual heart of Azeroth, they may have something planned for that. So I'm not sure if it might be for Dragonflight or something in the future, but I think they may be wanting to use that or introduce that in a different sort of way. That sort of makes sense. That's just my take. Whether or not that happens, I don't know. But yeah, that's a take for that one. But yeah, Anduin is really good. He lived up to my expectations. Let's go to the Dance Dance Revolution boss, the Council of Blood in Castle Nathria. I think this was the boss that underwent the most changes from alpha to live. So what do we think? Did that boss really spark anyone's dancing groove?
I know for a lot of healers it was very annoying, especially when you're trying to heal people who miss their steps, and like you have to try and move and heal them up at the same time.
Yes.
But overall,
Yep.
it was pretty good.
Yeah, it was that, and trying to get your head around the dark recital. What's it called?
Yeah.
You want to pair up and leave circles behind. That was a really annoying mechanic, because you'd have people, you'd have your partner run away sometimes, and it was hard to catch up with them, and you just die.
And it was interesting how when you go back and do it, how many people actually forgot that mechanic existed.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's because not many people, including myself, were not a big fan of the boss. I can, however, approve that the way that they introduced the dancing mechanic. I think originally you were in like some sort of vehicle without being in sort of a vehicle. You had like 4 buttons to press, one over to your left, right, backwards, and forwards. I think they canned that because of the feedback that I got from the PR, and they just made it so you just move your character, which I thought that was a really good decision. So I think they did really good in regards to that. And I also love the idea that you can choose which bosses to kill first, second, and third, because all strategies are viable. It's just that some are going to be easier and harder than others. I don't know. What do you think, Ducky?
There's multiple ways of doing council fights, and Blizzard, I feel, is the king of council fights throughout their history of World of Warcraft. Whether it be 3 bosses in the case of this one that we're talking about, or whether it be a main boss and a whole bunch of ads, that's still, main ads would be still considered a council fight to a point. They've done a really good job scripting this council fight. Like you said, you can pick which boss you want to kill, which forces you into different phases, which runs different abilities at, depending on which one you're killing. That's great, because and I want Blizzard to do more fights like that, because if you have let's say a ranged heavy composition, you can push one boss faster than another boss to suit your composition. If you've got a melee heavy composition, you can push another boss. If you've got low DPS, you can push another boss. I like that, because you can adjust to your strengths as a raid. And I really would applaud Blizzard for doing it more often. As far as the dance phase, doing a small intermission to gain a buff and have that risk reward, again, I'm all for. I think one of the complaints was to move it from a vehicle mechanic to a movable mechanic. One of the things they couldn't get down pat was the UI errors. So if you've ever noticed, whenever you hop on the back of a dragon that has that vehicle bar down the bottom, sometimes it would glitch out, and Shadowlands has been notorious for that glitching since Shadowlands dropped, and they haven't addressed it. That was also another thing. People would go into the dance phase, and some people would say, hey, I've got, and I'm just going to use an example, LVUI, I don't see my vehicle mechanic bar. And everyone's like, well, we see it. And that was probably why they could not get it to work. Long story short, I'm a fan of the fight overall. I think it's not a bad thing. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Okay. I guess we'll move on to probably my most disliked boss of the expansion, and that would probably be Fate's Scriber Carlo. And I'm just going to start off by saying, although they did something new with Fate's Scriber Carlo with the rings, it was a good idea. I just didn't like it at all. I'd rather any other mechanic. And also apparently having some sort of weak core made it a whole lot easier, which I totally don't disagree with, but I don't think it's really needed, because you know how against I am with weak cores and any sort of UI enhancements. because I feel like they're not needed. I hate doing the rings as well because it was very fiddly, and you'd get on. Sometimes that would stop and start at weird times, regardless if you had the right amount of people on it, which would usually cause to a wipe because you just got to start running those rings immediately. So that's my big down. That's why that's the most hated boss for me. As mentioned, the arena looks really cool. However, it's like you're standing on a bunch of rings. What about you guys? What do you think of the Fate Scribe Rocalo?
Yeah, if we once we got the opportunity to skip, I was always going to go for the skip. It's like kill it once, and yeah, we Gucci. That's enough.
Yeah, agree with you on that one. Daki, what about you?
I'm in the middle with this one because I could quite easily. Okay, let me split it down the middle. Execution of the boss, as far as Blizzard delivering it into the hands of the players, they could have done some tweaks to make it a very good boss, basically. But there's a lot of things that people may have missed. Like there's a lot of hidden lore in that boss. There's a lot of things that Fate Scribe says in his dialogue that relates, believe it or not, all the way back to Legion. So there's a lot of hidden lore in there that a lot of people would have missed because it's a busy fight essentially. The rings could have been done better. Here's a hot tip: reduce the rings in half, make the platform or the area that you have to stand in larger, and make it more important to get that ring to a certain location. So instead of having what were there, like 6 rings, 7 rings or something, have 3 or 4 rings. That's all you needed. Make the rings a bit bigger, so the platform that you move, make that bigger, and instead of making it 1 or 2 people that moves the ring, make it so that if you put 5 people on that ring's gonna freaking hoik ass. It's going to spin very quickly. You see what I mean? So like you could, like, depending on your composition, again, you could send one person out there. One person could absolutely do it if they're on the ball and if it was in the right position. But hell, if you sent 5 of your players out there, sure, you would lose a little bit of DPS on the boss, but that ring's going to spin so fast, it's going to get locked in position, and then you can get back to the boss a lot quicker. Little changes like that would have made that fight so much more enjoyable, but keeping the theme of that whole ring and that seer, because essentially he's a seer. He uses those rings to predict and see the future, essentially.
Yeah, I can see it. Using a method like that would make it more enjoyable. Would make it also easier. So the boss placement there might be a little bit skewed, but I do see where you're going with that. Yeah, I do sort of like that, but I didn't. So just a, a big thumbs down for me.
Again, split that question into 2 halves. One half being what we got, and the second half being what could have been better.
Yeah.
And that's 100%. Blizzard did good for what they were trying to do, but that fight could have been so much better.
Yeah, it could have. So move over to a bit of a weird pick, Lady Minerva Darkvein. I'll go with you first, Dak, here. What are your thoughts on Lady Minerva Darkvein? Because there's a lot of interesting things going on there at fight.
I'm going to look at it because Ruby's going to have a massively different experience to this than I am. And from a tanking point of view, you fall asleep. Can I be brutally honest? It's like, put boss in this location, taunt swap, awesome. Use cooldown, read a book, make an egg sandwich, and then come back and taunt swap again. Like, it's very boring. From a tanking point of view, like, that's all you do. It's from a tanking point of view, it's a tank and spank fight. However, I did get to DPS that boss fight, and you've got more things to do as a DPS. You've got to do mechanics, so it's more enjoyable as a DPS. But I'm sure Ruby's got a different point of view from healing this.
Yeah, I didn't find it terrible to heal. Initially when I first got it down in heroic on Horde, I was actually DPS then. I wasn't healing, so I was doing it from both perspectives. I think the worst part was when all of the damage that you would take from having to strategically click the canisters, like knowing your timing, because if you did it at the wrong time or you tried to do more than one at once, the whole raid would take so much damage.
Yeah, and it's one of those fights where you gotta react really quickly to the mechanics, because if you don't, what is it? If you don't soak the puddles, you're pretty much dead. If you don't,
If you
Get
don't do the lines,
yeah, the
yeah,
connect the dots sort of thing,
yeah,
you're dead. There's something else as well. I suppose if you didn't avoid the lines, connecting the people, you were dead, because that did a lot of damage. I did die a lot of times going to that. And if you weren't smart with the canisters, you were pretty much all dead anyway. But I think the canisters and each one empowers a different mechanic. I thought was really, really cool, and how it changes based off the boss's health. So like the quicker you can kill it, the less you can deal with that mechanic, and you can choose which phase to use your hero. Like if you'd rather do if you're having a lot of trouble with the mechanic in phase 2, then you can hero there. If you want to just burst the boss down right there and then at the last phase, then you could do that as well. So again, but like Council of Bloods, there's all the different choices that you could do. Overall, an average boss. I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's definitely not the worst. And then I think the last one, which might get a little bit of discussion, just like Anduin, is the Lady Sylvanas Windrunner.
yes.
It was quite a marathon, and it was quite. I know that Wraith did not get this down. I believe Mutiny did.
We did, yep.
We did.
We did.
Yeah, and then I managed to get it down with my American Guild. So I think our point of views might be a little bit different, but I'll go with Decky first. What do you think of Lady Sylvanas Windrunner?
For an end boss, it is pretty much the right duration. You want your end bosses to be, first of all, around between that 10 and 15 minute mark. I mean, you can vary it obviously depending on the importance of that end boss, really. So from a tanking point of view, having that many phases and having it in that duration, honestly, I'm not against those long fights. What I was against is the difficulty ramp between, say, phases 2 and 3. Like, I didn't end up finishing it, but I did end up doing a lot of phase 3, or the very last platforms, I guess you could say, in heroic, and it's a good fight overall. Like, if you look at the progression of the fight, it starts off, it gets a little bit harder, you've got to do different mechanics, and then right at the end, it's just like a bit chaotic with what you got to do and everything. So the progression is fine. The length of the fight, it's fine. I think that they just needed to tone down the ramp a little bit. So make the last phase just a tad easier, because if you look at how many people actually cleared heroic Sylvanas, percent wise across how many people attempted that raid, it's a very, very small number. Like, it's ridiculously small. And I really think Blizzard should have started looking at those numbers and going, hey, we've only got 6% or whatever it was of guilds clearing. So I think it's like between 6 or 12% or something of people that entered that raid got Sylvanas. That it's a very small number. They should have started looking at that and going, hang on a minute, we need to adjust this so more people can experience this fight. I don't know what the number was at the end of the expansion, the end of that thing either, but I liked it. It just didn't blow my socks off. There's there's a few reasons why, and I'll say I'll tell you about them later. But nah, it was okay. I'll put it like if I was marking it out of 10, I'd be like, it's like a 6 maybe.
I think the thing I disliked about it the most was the whole. There was no area that like once you reached a certain stage, if you wiped, you had to go back straight to the beginning and do the whole thing
Yeah.
over and over again.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I don't know how you would sort of get around that, but it made for some very, very long attempts.
I think sorry to interject. I think I've heard that so many times where people are like, oh fuck, we got to go back to the beginning of a 12-minute boss fight. It's only a 12-minute boss fight. When you look at the end bosses of pretty much any of your expansions, they are generally around that length of time. I think what makes it hard is that the mechanics you have to do during those 12 minutes or 15 minutes, depending on your group composition, obviously, is what makes it feel like a 20-minute boss fight, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, because if you go back to Wrath of the Lich King was a 14-odd minute fight in Heroic, and it had, if not more mechanics, or about the same, or if not more mechanics than Sylvanas did. When you wiped, you had to go back all the way to the start. Have a look at Deathwing at the end of Cataclysm. He had, essentially, it was one phase, but 4 parts of one phase. Garrosh is another one. Garrosh had many components to it, and they're all probably, if you literally just get a table, like an Excel spreadsheet, and put down, like literally put Garrosh down and Sylvanas down next to each other, and start putting down their mechanics and what abilities they do and how many phases, you'll probably find Sylvanas is probably on par with end bosses of expansions. Here's the problem. She's not the end boss of an expansion.
No.
Yeah. Well,
Why? Yeah.
the bosses you mentioned, like Deathwing and Garrosh, I wasn't raiding then, so Sylvanas is probably my first real example of a super long end boss fight.
Yeah, no, she's definitely like. Put it this way: if you picked Sylvanas up and put her as like, just swap her and the jailer around, just as an example, right? Just for discussion purposes. If she was the last boss of the expansion, it would be more fitting for her to have that many mechanics and that many phases and that amount of difficulty at current item level. You know what I mean? But she's not. She's a midway raid boss throughout the expansion. If we're talking the expansion, they could have easily chopped out a third of that fight, altered it a little bit, and still come out with a really reasonable fight and a fitting fight for Sylvanas. But that's why I only say it's like a 6 out of 10. Honestly, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what some really long bosses are. I just quickly looked at how long my original Cahoon kill was. Surprisingly, it was 7.5 minutes, even though it felt like it was 13 minutes because of all the things going on in Cahoon. Otherwise, I think that probably Queen Ajara, probably the boss most famous for having the most individual mechanics. I think that was pretty long. And yeah, Sylvanas is really, really long as well. Yeah, I just hated the fact that if you wiped, you had to go again. If they had made phase 1 and the bridge phase like half as long, and then made phase 3,
Essentially phase 3, yeah.
or the final phase. They made the final phase a lot
from a healer
longer.
perspective, we don't want phase 3 to be any longer. Just no. No.
Because phase 1 was long, man. I mean, because what, you had to DPS the boss down to
80.
70, or was it 80?
It was 80.
Something. Oh, okay. Well, I thought it would've been-
82% or something like that.
Yeah, or 83. I think I remember. She goes immune and she does all the things. Yeah, she has a lot of. There's a lot of times where she's not directly attackable either, so it kind of sucks for melee, but it also does suck for everyone else because it does drag out the fight a little bit. Or maybe not for healers because they can gain mana back at that point. when she disappears in the first phase, when she disappears a lot of times on the bridge, running across the bridges and the chains and stuff. Yeah, I think all that was cool to be in a fight. Was it cool to progress on? Absolutely not. I think I said it in the description of my Sylvanas kill video. This was a hell of a boss to progress on. It was so annoying, but it was probably one of the most epic bosses I've ever done. Probably next to Gahoon, and probably next to Jaina, I suppose.
Really felt like an achievement when you got it.
Yes, exactly. Because been spending that long progressing on just that one boss, whereas I think all the other bosses were kind of easy in comparison. Fate's great. Even Kel'Thuzad was, felt like it was quite easy. Painsmith, Soulrender, that sort of thing. Sylvanas as a whole, I think, yeah, it was good. They definitely did some things right with Sylvanas. They definitely fitted the mechanics in with her theme, right? Like, she's a hunter. She shoots out a lot of arrows, and the patterns of the arrows look really, really cool. Or like the way she does it with all the zigzags and the circles and such. That was really, really cool. And she grabs the spires on the edge of the arena, and if you get hit by that, you're pretty much impaled, dead. Zip, bye bye. And it was really funny watching someone die to that. The chains were a bit annoying. I'm not talking about the chains in the intermission, but the chains that pull you towards the arrow and one-shots you if you get too close to it. This is on heroic anyway.
Yeah, that was hard. That was hard. That was one of the harder stages to heal through.
Yeah, because you couldn't really move until your arrow was killed. And you had to go around helping everyone else with their arrows. Cool mechanic, but didn't really pay off that well. I liked the last phase though. The last phase was really cool. Standing on the 4 different platforms, and it's got the Covenant sigils etched into them. Taking arrows to the other platforms, I thought was a really cool idea. It just truly made an epic boss fight. So I think that's all the bosses I wanted to go through. Is there anything that maybe could be improved upon, or stuff that you would expect to see in the next expansion? For me personally, I had this idea of, because I don't think it's that unreasonable to have at least one person in each covenant, so they could add some sort of mechanics based around having those sort of covenants. I don't know what they do, but say if like you had a Necrolord in the group, they could I don't know, they could make your raid take less damage from a certain mechanic, or if you're Kyrian, you can maybe repair a broken Goliath and he can help shield you from some sort of mechanic. I don't know, little things like that I thought would have made it really cool and really immersive. Because I know you don't find many Venthyr nowadays. I think you just see maybe a Venthyr Demon Hunter, maybe a Venthyr Priest, maybe a Venthyr Warrior, but that's about it. I mean, you've got a bajillion Night Fays, so there wouldn't be any reason not to have any Night Fae in any raid group. Yes, Hunters, I'm looking at you.
Well, it's funny because that's an awesome idea in theory, and I'd really like to see something like that. But considering that as of now, Blizz has basically made Night Fae the best covenant for like 75% of all classes. It's
more than that, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that does really, really suck. I really wish they would have buffed all the other covenants, and I think that's mainly because of their soulbinds. I think, as said on some of the forums, the Night Fae soulbinds are really, really versatile, and they had it worked for basically every single situation. Where some certain soulbinds had some things that weren't available to others, like the cheat death on Airmare, or the sort of extra damage / utility from Mechanicos. I just feel
Can't
like
go past Blink Fox though. like
nerf.
collecting all the soul shapes.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, Door of Shadows does do that as well, and you can take. I can't remember which soul one it was, but you can have 2 charges of the Door of Shadows. But that sort of things does not match at all compared to a Steward or a Fleshcraft. Although they both have their uses and they're both really really good defensive wise and utility wise. I just thought that was a bit FA. But I think things to maybe expect, or at least for me, in the expansion, I want all the bosses dragons. Yeah, that's about it. No, I don't know. I think I would want them to see something different from some sort of dragon fight, something we've maybe never seen before. I don't know what that would be, but I really like them to get creative with these dragons, as it is a dragon expansion. Something about more than, a dragon has a frontal breath, so don't stand in front of it. And it's got the tail lash, so don't stand behind it. So I don't know. I'll just be very curious to see what happens. What do you think, Jackie?
There's a lot of things. If we're talking, there's a lot of things I want them to do, and like talking just to cap off what you were just saying. I think Blizzard are going to be fine with their creativity, because you've only got to look at is it Atramedes boss, the dragon boss Atramedes, the blind dragon. Back in, what was it, Kata, I think it was.
Yeah,
anyway, yeah. So like they can do different styles of dragons. Have a blind dragon that uses sound to try and locate its enemies. That sort of thing. That sort of concept. If they follow that path, that's good. What I really want to see though is, I want them to not leave us hanging with so many bosses throughout this expansion. Throughout the next expansion. If you just have a look at the pattern that they've got for Shadowlands, it's such a letdown, because you've got things like Sidon-Athris. We didn't kill him. We knocked him out and he got away. And then you've got Sylvanas Windrunner. We didn't kill her. She, got away, sort of thing. And then you've got all the bosses in the Spatula that don't actually die. So you've got Halondrus, doesn't die. Lahuvim doesn't die. Anduin doesn't die. Like, all these bosses, if you add them up in this expansion alone, what are we even doing there? Like, what's the purpose of fighting these bosses if they're just going to, oh, cool, thank you, and then they disappear, or they get taken away from us? Or, the jailer's escaped our grasp how many times now? Every single time we catch up to him, he's like, oh, I'm just going to take my personal portal, guys. See ya. It's not fun, if that makes sense. If there's one thing that they can learn from what they've done now to moving on is, and this is a whole new video on itself, is, honestly, the jailer did not feel threatening this whole expansion. He didn't feel threatening. Like, the Lich King felt threatening in Wrath of the Lich King, because he felt like a tyrant. Deathwing felt threatening because he came over and he would destroy a whole zone with his breath, and he would do certain things that would make you feel like he is a end boss of an expansion. The jailer, however, for some reason, since the beginning of this expansion, we were able to sneak into his lair, walk right up to his big toe, sit there listening to all of his conversations, walk around his lair. He doesn't feel threatening. Like, there's no threatening presence there. And then every single time we've caught up with him in Torghast, he just goes, teleport, bye, see ya. Then we caught up to him in Oribos, and he goes, teleport, bye, see ya. It's like, he doesn't feel like a boss. He just feels like he's an annoyance more than anything. Just let us kill end bosses for starts. Like, you've just taken away so many end bosses, like Anduin. Granted, he was never going to die because of lore reasons, but Sylvanas, we never got the opportunity to physically get retribution on. She just, okay, right, she teleports out. Anduin teleports out. Halondrus teleports out. Lahuvim teleports out. Bloody Jailer teleports out at the end of the cinematic. Like, not the spatula, but domination, chains of domination sort of thing. Like, it's just, let us kill the end bosses. Like, it's disappointing, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I really wish they would have done something with Side and Athreus, since Contessa basically took Ramonia, which basically houses Denathrius' soul, and I really thought that they were going to make like a Denathrius the Eternal sort of thing, like they did with Socrathar and Hellfire Citadel, but I think they just didn't do it. If they did that with going back to the idea of Sepulchre being two raids squished together, if they did the second, if they put a sort of Denathrius the Eternal in the second half of that raid, I would have loved to see that. And no, the prototype Pantheon doesn't count, obviously. But yeah, I do. Yeah, I do agree with you. But at the same time, this is the expansion where I think a lot of the villains were killed very, very quickly. Like Helia, Virez, what was it called? What's the other Margaret? Margaret Stradama. And then
But this is also the expansion that ties in a lot of years of World of Warcraft, though. So that, like, in all technicality, moving forward, Helia could not have come with us. Viraz could not, like all the bosses you sort of mentioned. It's like they had to die essentially. Like it's the end hurrah for a massive chapter in World of Warcraft. Like we're not going to be taking a lot of past stuff and including Shadowlands stuff with us in the future. Hell, I don't even think that we're going to really see much of Anduin, Jaina, Thrall, all of that. Like that's all tied into end chapters. We're not going, like, this is you got to understand, like, this is an end point, really.
Yeah. Yeah, all for those type of characters, and then they introduce back all the dragon aspects for the next expansion.
We don't know if the aspects are coming back. This is a speculation, though.
Yeah.
There's no confirmed thing that the aspects are going to, like, they probably will, but you got to understand the dragon aspects lost their powers. They're just humans. They're just mortals now. They're not special. Like all the aspects is when the Titans saw speciality or special things in certain beings, and they imbued them with the powers of the dragonflight to do certain things, and that was really about it. They can still turn into dragons, but they lost their powers at the end when they defeated Deathwing, when they killed their brother, really.
Yeah. So they're there, and they could be used for story reasons.
They'll definitely be there to guide us to the Dragon Isles, 100%. Yeah. But by how much I don't know. But it's dragons.
Introduce new dragons, like new dragons on those sort of Dragon Isles.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Yeah. What do you think, Ruby? We kind of skipped over you for quite a bit.
No, that's all good.
What do you think could have been done better this expansion?
Yeah, I can't really see. I don't get as deeply into the lore as you guys, probably because I haven't been anywhere near playing as long. So yeah, I don't know. I might sit that one out. I don't think. I mean, I like all the raids. Like, it's just, yeah. A lot of the story behind it. I think because I am so busy during the fights, like you were saying about what Fate Scribe, Riccardo, yeah, was saying, like you're absolutely right. I missed all of that because I was too busy trying to keep people alive. So I'm going to have to go back and actually look that up.
Yeah, I think one thing they definitely got right with this expansion is that they experimented a lot of new mechanics. As I was saying, Dance Revolution, the rings, new sort of lengths to fights, like having a long sort of 13-minute fight with Sylvanas, but making it like a spectacle. Like it was like you're traveling across chains and bridges, and you're making use of NPCs, kind of like what they did with scenarios with Malfurion growing the trees, and then in this case using Thrall and Jaina to make bridges and sort of thing. I would actually like to see that in the future, like make the NPCs matter. Like when we got to the end of Hellfire Citadel, you had Archimonde, and then to help us, or they didn't really do shit. They like Grommash, Yrel, and Khadgar. They just sort of looked like they were doing something, but they actually weren't.
They shout words of encouragement, but that's about it.
Yeah, same with Gul'dan as well. It's just Khadgar. I'd like them to involve NPCs in the fight. Actually, the Stone Legion generals did that. I mean, Prince Ranithal and General Draven broke the stone form on both General Karl and General Grishal. So I think they did a good job on that boss in terms of that in particular. But that is also something I would like to see. Just if you're going to, yeah.
I did just think of something. So touching on what Daki said about can we please just kill end bosses? I think the thing that I really liked about Sylvanas was that finally the Alliance got to feel the frustration of not being able to end their mortal enemy like the Horde felt when on the Jaina fight.
Yeah.
And it was quite fun to like with Anduin, like try and dot him up as Horde to but like during that phase change it became a bit of fun for us.
Yeah. Would you compare that to Battle of Dazar'alor against King Rastakhan or Jaina?
Well, actually, playing through the Horde story for King Rastakhan, you actually ended up feeling really, really sorry for Talanji, even as Alliance, because she was put in a position by her father that she shouldn't have ever been put in.
Yeah.
He basically sold her out, sold her soul, and like as a parent myself, I can't imagine doing that to my own child. So yeah, I think the Horde really disliked King Rastakhan as much as the Alliance did.
Yeah, and I think Daki can agree with me. I'm really sad that that's where they left Talanji. They didn't use her at all in the story after that. There was the thing with the allied race questline, but yeah, that's about it. That's where they sort of left the Zandalari when 8.2 came out. They just sort of abandoned it. Very sad. Anything you would expect to see in Dragonflight, Ruby?
I'm not sure yet. I have not actually had a lot of opportunity to sort of read through everything that places like Wowhead have posted, so I'm actually going to make a point of doing that, and then I might. Yeah, I'm actually like the thought of playing a dragon. I think I like the idea of Drak there, and I like the idea that with the two classes that they've made for them, sort of like Demon Hunters only being able to be a Blood Elf or a Night Elf. I like that if you want to be either like Devastation or Preservation, you have to be Drakthir. You can't be anything else.
Yeah, agreed. And something I just thought of, would you both like to see some sort of mechanic return like they did with Lay Guardian Urgos, I think, and Malagos, where you're on, you can mount one of three dragons. One of them was a tank, a DPS, and a healing dragon. Would you mind to see, or would you like to see, a sort of vehicle combat boss, kind of like Malagos style, where you're fighting on the ground for half of it, and then you get up on dragons and you can DPS heal or
for a dungeon or for a raid?
For a raid. Or for both. Doesn't really matter.
I never actually did that back in the day, so I mean, sure, why not? It's something I haven't done before.
I mean, yes, as long as it's done tastefully. So the two ways that I would like seeing implemented would be, let's say you split your group, split your raid. Part of your raid goes and hops on dragons and does a certain thing, not for a long period of time, but does a certain couple of things to aid the fight, then comes back, and then maybe another group has to jump on some dragons and help. That would be fine.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that would be
But
cool.
not for the duration that, say, so like the Nexus, or was it Nexus or Oculus? It was Oculus, wasn't it? Oculus was like, as a lot of people like, oh, I hate hopping on dragons. Like the first part of the Oculus was perfect. You hopped on a dragon, you could use certain abilities, but you had to use the dragon to get to different locations. You hopped off the dragon, and then you were your own character, but then you hopped back on the dragon just to get to a different location. That, I think, is a great execution of how to use that sort of vehicle in a dungeon. Where it sort of got a bit was towards the end of the Oculus, when you were on the dragon to do the last boss. I don't think people liked that per se, but if they could implement dragons in such a way that's like, what about is it Grim Bratol? Is it Grim Bratol?
Yeah, you use the dragons.
But you
to
hopped on
clear
the dragons
trash.
to clear the something like that, where
awesome.
it's integrated into the dungeon. I don't think anyone's got a problem with, because in all honesty, you're probably on the dragons just as long in Grim Bratol as you were for the first half of the Oculus. Like it's so it's fine. Yeah, I reckon it's fine.
Yeah. With Grim Bratol, you actually didn't have to hop on the dragons. You could just walk right past them, but it was efficient to clear the trash. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Those good points. And yeah, I've just been trying to think of stuff, and then the part with Malagos and the Oculus just sort of came to mind. Sort of thinking something like dragons. They'll fit. And I was also sort of thinking they maybe do something like a Spine of Deathwing, but I hope and pray that they don't, because I didn't do it when it was current, but I did it on Alpha, but it was fun.
So, like fights like that, fight like Spine of Deathwing and such, I think they need to have more of those fights in raids. Don't have every single boss like it. Don't do every single boss like it. But when you've got a raid combined of 10 bosses or whatever you want to call it, or 9 bosses, you need to have one out there boss. Have like Spine of Deathwing-esque style at least once in a raid, because nothing's boring for a tank or a DPS. And I'll say this, like, the idea of a raid is to drive a story or a narrative, to tell a story. The idea of dungeons is really there for beating up, characters and things. So, like, if you're trying to tell a story, make it interesting. Don't have every single boss fight as in taunt boss to edge of room, everyone stack, move 5 yards to the left, dodge the ball that's on the ground, and then move more 5 yards to the left and dodge a beam, and then move. Like, it's boring. Tank and spank fights are boring. Like, if you want to pad your numbers, then have those bosses, like have 1 or 2 of those in a raid, but have bosses interesting, have mechanics, split your raid, have certain people go and do a task and then come back. Like, not every boss has to be, hey, I got, within the 1 percentile of my DPS because I stood still and just did a rotation. Go and hit a turnip or a training dummy if you want to see big numbers. A raid is there to tell a story. It's there to drive a narrative. It's there for that sort of interaction. And I think that's where people have gotten lost, because a lot of players these days that have started in later expansions, let's say from Warlords of Draenor onwards or something like that, a lot of fights are just tank and spank and you can ignore mechanics. A lot of fights are where they need to have more dynamic. They need to have more dynamic fights. They need to have something there to indulge the players and intrigue them into a story, basically. That's my opinion, honestly. I don't,
Yeah, which I felt like they did quite well with the expansion. They're not just tank and spank. So, like, there are some tank and spank bosses, of course, but they're not all your typical fall over bosses.
Don't want to drag this on too long, and
No, it'll be
like,
a bit soon.
But Ruby and Avatar, what's your thoughts on, is it, hang on, let me get this right, is it Stitch Flesh?
Surgeon Stitch Flesh?
Yeah, Stitch Flesh. Imagine taking the Stitch Flesh fight, turning it into a raid boss. Imagine that concept. So, obviously, bolster the health of everything. But imagine entering into a boss fight. You've got to deal with a lieutenant ad, and you've got to do certain mechanics, and you've got to do certain things. Then you've got to summon down the boss somehow, either by killing it or doing like the hook mechanic or something similar to that. The boss comes down, your hero, your DPS, you still do mechanics, the boss jumps away. Then you follow another set of mechanics, get the boss to come back down. Like that sort of style raid fight, I freaking love. But if you had Blightbone as an example as a raid fight,
Yeah, don't
it's
Oh,
boring.
yeah.
So you see what I mean? So see the difference? How one is tank and spank and you just move a couple of yards to avoid the green stuff on the ground. But the other one is do mechanics and do a certain steps to then summon the boss down, and you do certain things. That it's much more memorable, it's much more enjoyable, it's much more engaging. It's not dull. It's not like, oh, hey, guess what, guys? The worm spawned again. What do? Let's just fucking move 5 yards to the left. All right, raid. Everyone move 5 yards to the left. All right, what do we do now? Stand still. Yeah, that's all we do. Like, it's boring.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing those sort of bosses without making it sort of semi-repetitive or boring. Because like the more you do the fight, the more sort of bored you get of it, and the less tolerance you have for it. Like I feel like that way with not a lot of bosses, but some bosses definitely do have that sort of time where you've done it for the 20th time and I was like, yeah, I'm so fucking sick of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. We've been going for about, it's coming up to an hour now. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, that was good. Talk about our likes and dislikes of the raid. Overall, I think they did sort of nail this raiding experience, and it was definitely much better than Battle for Azeroth. But then again, that could probably be a whole other videos with that going on. So, alright, we'll leave it there. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Peace.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.